You're basically saying that anytime there's electricity, there's an emittance.
Yes.
That emittance has a magnitude and amount. The field can be of a certain size, and different amounts of energy create different sizes or different frequencies of fields.
Yeah, the frequency has to do with the rate of change of the charge.
That's the hertz, the cycles per second.
You are back with the Everything's Energy Show. Today, we're diving into something very interesting. EMFs, and are they trying to kill you? Well, maybe not if they're trying to kill you, but what the heck is an EMF? I'm Roland. I'm here with my two co-hosts, Marino and Mela. How you guys doing?
Good.
Doing
How
good.
are you?
Life is good. Life is good. I'm excited for this one because this is an area I would really like to dive into myself. Marino, you're an engineer.
Yes.
At least you say that you are.
I go around telling people that, and they believe me.
Yeah, you do a good job at
Here
it.
we are.
So people talk about EMFs all the time. I think it's something that gets freely thrown around. Oh, your phone has EMFs. Oh, there's a cell phone tower, your personal care, hair dryers, refrigerators, things like that. What is an EMF?
Yeah, so kind of real quick backtracking on this. When I was studying engineering and I got to physics 2 and we started learning about electromagnetic fields, I knew that I was in the right field because I was just like, this is the most coolest thing. Because up until that point, I didn't believe in invisible forces.
Oh, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Did that field resonate with you?
It did, very much so. So it was like, it's like solid evidence and proof that there are invisible forces. So EMF is an acronym for electromagnetic fields, and it is the base of the majority of all our communications, if not all of them. The majority of our technology is what I wanted to say. And it's not really, I think it gets a bad connotation. People like hear it and they immediately assume that it's bad. In the very same way, when you hear radiation, you're just like, bad. No, all electromagnetic, waves that are propagated are radiation. The question is at what frequency and how much energy is being transmitted, right? So light is radiation, but then the EMF in your microwave is also radiation, which is bad for you. So electromagnetic field is a coupled field between an electric and a magnetic field that gets propagated through space. So an electromagnetic field is the field that's created by the motion of charge.
Okay. So in that context, you're basically saying that anytime there's electricity, there's an emittance.
Yes.
That emittance has a magnitude and amount. There's obviously like the field can be of a certain size. And different amounts of energy create different sizes or different frequencies of fields. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, the frequency has to do with the change, the rate of change of the charge.
That's the hertz, the cycles per second?
Cycles per second, correct.
Okay. So then it sounds like that's fairly innocuous, right? It's just a state of being. It's something that exists.
Mm-hmm.
Why do people say EMFs are dangerous to human health?
There's, before I get to kind of the technicalities of it, there's just the unknown of people not understanding. And then you think about like 100 years ago, we weren't in this soup of all of these fields around us, and understanding the human body works off of electrical signals. Then it's like, well, it has to have some kind of influence, and it's just better not to be in it than not. So I think there's just like the belief systems around it. But separate from that, we know that certain frequencies or energies can ionize cells in the body, can break down DNA, can cause disruptions in the way that our cells communicate and all those things. So I think that that's where it gets to the point where it's like, okay, this is bad for us.
I think I've had my own analogy that works in my brain. Like, yes, our bodies are a series of electrical impulses. I think that's kind of a common understanding. This cell shoots energy to that cell, and it's like electrical charges. And then when you have a lot of background noise, I feel like it's like your cells are trying to yell at each other in a crowded nightclub, and more things are more likely to get misconstrued, and or it takes more energy then for the body to communicate with all of that kind of background noise,
Right.
disrupting potentially.
Yeah. And that's a great analogy, and I like it because it also helped me understand kind of like understanding the magnitude of the effects of something in comparison to something else. And so a lot of people look at cell towers and they're immediately like, oh, this is like radiating us and it's killing us. But then you look at your cell phone and it turns out that your cell phone is actually much more dangerous than a cell tower depending on how close you are to it, right? So the distance matters most in comparison to the magnitude of the field that you're being exposed to. And one of the analogies in the explanation was, it's like being in a stadium, like a sports stadium, and hearing maybe a phone vibrate when everyone else is talking and the game is going on. And it's kind of like the comparison, right, in sound to like the different fields.
So in saying that, people focus on the negatives of EMFs in terms of how they negatively impact our health. So what you're saying is there's basically a transference of energy that could be disruptive to the cell. I really liked your analogy, because your analogy is basically talking about how poor quality EMFs, poor quality in relation to the body, fragment the communication. So the body loses its coherence, which is kind of like the antithesis of what the EE system does, for example, because your mom has talked about this in a multitude of ways.
And also I feel like it's like, oh, if that's a couple hours every day over time, not a big deal. But if that's a 24/7 state of being, your cortisol levels and your stress levels and all that will be affected over time, most likely, as far as, versus if you have breaks, right?
And I think the biggest takeaway in terms of like protecting you, or just like having awareness of like how disruptive this could be for you, is proximity. It's just like how close you are. Because in our bodies, we are releasing these electrical charges, but to our cells, being so close to one another and sending those signals, it's a really powerful signal in comparison to maybe this device is generating a more powerful signal than your cell. But if you're 100 meters away, there's not really something to think about.
It's irrelevant.
It's irrelevant.
Yeah.
But when you think about having your phone just millimeters, centimeters away from your skin, from your body.
Your reproductive organs.
I used to do that. Before I kind of like looked into this, when I would be in the car, I would put my phone between my legs because it was just comfortable and easy for me to
And
reach.
how many women used to put their phones in their brassiere?
Used to? I still see it in the gym.
I feel like most of them don't, because the phones are so big these days.
But they put them in the front of the pants near the ovary, because that's a more,
They don't. I was saying up top versus down low.
Anywhere there's fatty tissue, that's probably not going to do well with radiation.
Well, and I do know from certain people that things like radiation do accumulate more in the testicles and the prostate than they do, let's just say, your shoulder.
Yeah, the tissue has to matter. But there would have to be positive EMFs, no? Because I've heard like the Earth has the Schumann resonance, which is a 7.83 hertz emittance. So the Earth has its own magnetic pulse, its own magnetic field. And isn't that the theory of why grounding works?
Yeah, I mean, so our bodies do accumulate charge. I mean, if you rub your feet on a carpet, for example, you accumulate charge, but charge within itself just creates a field, and there's no frequency to it, and so that we don't even have to have a conversation. It's not detrimental. It's the oscillation that becomes an issue. And yeah, there are different frequencies that resonate more with the body, which I don't know too much about, but I do know that we're in an ocean, right, of electromagnetic fields, and everything emits photons, which is the unit of measurement of these fields. We can only see a slither of that, which is the visible light spectrum. But if you were to kind of shift that over and take a look at the human body from an infrared perspective, which is how infrared cameras and night vision works, we are literally giving off our own field. We are giving off approximately 100 watts of energy. So we're literally a 100-watt light bulb walking around. We just can't see it. So when I hear your mom say we're beings of light, she's not using a metaphor. We literally are beings of light emitting photons or electromagnetic waves.
Well, I think that's one of the things too, is you can measure, I think it was called GDV and now it's called BioWell, and there's other things that measure your visual, like your discharge essentially. And those, you should be closer to 100, and then most people are operating more in the 30 to 40 range, and things like cancer or other serious illnesses don't really exist or develop in the body until you get below 20 on that energy level, because your body has enough energy to combat that cellular growth essentially.
Yeah, and so that's how we end up with kind of an imbalance in what is optimal in terms of electrical charge or frequencies for the body. And so doing things like discharging and getting rid of whether it's positive or negative, and just getting you back to baseline of doing things like grounding or just getting away. Have you ever been in, I know they have some technologies that have it, but essentially technically what it's called is a Faraday cage. which is anytime you insulate yourself within a metal contraption, which is the very same reason why when you get into an elevator, you lose signal. It isn't because the elevator is enclosed, because we're in an enclosed room now and we have service. It's because it's an enclosed metal contraption. And so if you ever get into a Faraday cage, it's much more than just the silence that comes from it. Is the fact that you're moving away from all of these like high frequencies, which I personally think that they're disruptive, despite all of the research that I've seen that claim that they're not. But of course, they're going to say that, going back to valuing profit. They're not going to tell you that your Wi-Fi router or that your phone is cooking you.
It's an interesting idea, because I've never been in a Faraday cage, but I've had these like sleeves where you put your phone in them, and there's no, so clearly what you're doing is you're just blocking everything external, and you're existing within whatever your own internal field of generation is. The aspect of how it impacts health, which is really interesting to me, that I've read into, is how chronic exposure to EMF fields influences rhythms and brainwaves in the body. Have you guys dived into this at all?
No.
So a lot of EMFs, you talked about the electromagnetic spectrum, right? We have this incredible large bandwidth of different frequencies from extremely low to extremely high. Most EMFs that are of electronic origin are oscillating higher than what the Earth was ever meant to make, or what our bodies naturally oscillate at. And the idea of entrainment is when you put two frequencies together, usually the low frequency is more so influenced by the high frequency, and they kind of find an interface. I don't know if that's the right terminology. So brain waves, when you're sleeping, are slow waves. When you're super stressed, they're high waves. So if you're around all these high wave EMFs perpetually, your brain can start to operate differently, and you experience that as mental stress, emotional dysregulation. So you can't actually get into your flow creative state. You can't get into a relaxed state because you're always being bombarded by something. But if it's someone's normal, they don't know that that influence is happening to them, because like you said, you can't see these fields. You can only feel them or interact with them.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's something you guys have dived into, but from a context of health, I think that's really powerful to know.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I mean, anytime that I'm in a city where I know that New York, they're focusing on micro towers, which is like moving away from just having one big tower, because the way that like our cellular networks work is you have a certain frequency, and then there's a band, and then that band gets divided, which means you can only divide it by so many, which means there's only so many people can be connected to that tower, which is the reason why if you ever go to a sports arena or something, you don't have service, and then you do, and then you don't, and it's because those bands are being divided by people and kind of going apart. So in New York, what they're doing is they're like, well, we have really good connections to like routers and Wi-Fi. Why don't we use the same concept for cellular towers? So instead of having one big tower, they're having a lot of small ones. So when you go to New York, you're
stressed all the time.
You're stressed all the time. I don't care what anyone tells me.
I think you would be anyway, but it doesn't help.
No. And so, so I think about that. I think about like I'm all of these like really high frequencies that didn't exist, that no natural thing oscillates at. And now my entire environment is that it's absolutely affecting me, and despite what the research says.
And that you've seen the 3G, 4G, 5G smart meters. So the frequencies and the pulsation of those frequencies keep getting higher, essentially, I think, in a sense. So that would continue to affect the nervous system, your sleep cycles, all of those things. And I know some people, they at the very least, they like to turn off their Wi-Fi router every evening, put their phones on airplane mode, or put their phones in a different room.
I do all of that.
Lots of little things that you can do that, like things you can control, because you can't control what's going on in the building next door.
Right. Yeah, and to the point that you were making earlier about like the disruption in the communication, I've had people tell me that when they do things like get into a Faraday cage with someone else, that they actually feel in tune with what that person is feeling and thinking. There's almost like you have these thoughts that are generating their own electrical discharges, which is creating a magnetic field, which then is interacting with yours, and kind of creating that as well. And they can tune into and feel much more connected to someone else because of it. And so now look at the opposite of that, of like having that in, maybe you have a family that you're raising in like New York, and you're completely out of touch with everyone around you, because those things that you otherwise would be in tune or aware of like are not there anymore.
Or even worse, you're tuning into their chaos and you guys are passing it back and
Yes.
forth unconsciously.
Yeah.
Both. I mean, I think there is I think you do think of people in New York being a lot more frenetic, shall we say, than those in small towns. And is it chicken or egg, I guess, at that point then? It
Yeah.
could go either way.
When I moved to Michigan, I literally thought that everyone was moving in slow motion. I thought it was something was going on. I'm like, and when I would go back to Jersey, everything was much more faster, much more. And to your point, it's like everything that's happening on with the technology, but then also the chaos that people are experiencing. And it was jarring. I didn't experience the same peace that I had when I was in Michigan, even though I didn't like the cold weather and everything that was going on there. But it was definitely like a slowdown, and it wasn't so angsty all the time.
Well, we are receivers and we're emitters of things, right? So if you think about electromagnetic energy, so energy and information to me are kind of synonymous. And we are able to pick up and receive that information, which is how empathy works. Or when you know when you see someone cry and all of a sudden you feel this like lump in your throat that builds. So that is a really interesting point to think about what's happening long term to society and also someone's individual health based upon what they're being exposed to. So in what you've said, the identification of EMFs and various things, have you learned anything about addressing them and strategies that someone can take if they want to lessen their exposure or manage their exposure? May had some great ideas with phone in airplane mode at night, turning off Wi-Fi. Is there anything else that you guys know of?
I think, like Mela mentioned, looking at the things you have control over. I've seen people who have routers in their bedrooms. Like that is a no. But even turning it off at night, if you're sleeping, like you don't necessarily have to have that. You may have a smart home and that's a whole different thing. But turning off your routers, putting your phone on airplane mode, or at least putting it away further than arm's reach. I've always sensed some kind of, I don't want to say nervous attachment, but whenever my phone is within my reach, it feels different to me than if I were to, put it in a drawer and put her away. So doing things like that as well. And then also if you're, looking at a neighborhood that you're going to move into, kind of like picking out like what kind of wireless communications are in that area too, or something you could look at.
Very interesting. I mean, I think adding to that, connecting in nature, forest bathing and these things that are now becoming, it's hilarious how things have to become vogue and popular in order for them to come back in favor. But trees emit electromagnetic energy. Anything that's alive emits a frequency. So when you're around that, I think your nervous system will then train with a more slow wave way of being, because they've proven that, being in nature can influence brainwave states.
Yeah.
Connecting in with the earth.
Getting out into nature and disconnecting is like one of the most powerful things that you can do. And I don't think we do it enough, especially people who live in the city, right? They don't necessarily go out in nature. It's easier for others. But that's huge. Yeah.
And the irony of us being in the studio right now, being in an EMF bomb, is I think I want to go to an EE system. Why don't we finish off with some aspects of how the system, that things that your mom has spoken about or things that you've taught me with.
Well, that is one of the effects of Scalar, is you're helping to nullify, transmute that electromagnetic field that's being created. It still exists, but I think of it as noise canceling headphones in a way for the body, where it's just no longer hearing all that background noise. Again, my analogy.
Yeah. And the frequencies, right? Our system's not operating at 5 gigahertz or anything like that, which is unnatural. And, despite everything that you read, I mean, when you look at why it becomes dangerous, it's a multivariable equation, but you look at the frequency and the amount of energy it's subject to. And frequency plays a role. That's what ultimately you can end up with ionizing radiation, which is, ultraviolet or X-ray. And so the frequency that you're exposed to plays a huge role. And so it's also the frequencies of the system that kind of get you into that rhythm of a more closely related to nature frequency than everything else that you're susceptible to.
It's awesome. I feel so much more practically understanding EMFs now, because they're, as I said, they get thrown around a lot in the health world. And there are things that we're taught to be worried about. But unless you really understand the nature of, there's both good and bad, there are things that you can do, strategically to offset, and what you can control, knowing what you can actually influence in your life is probably the best strategy. Any final thoughts, guys?
And I think as to that, a lot of people do have positive results from using PEMF mats and other grounding devices. And that in that case, it is a more specific frequency and it's pulsed. So it's kind of putting you into that rhythm versus going a constant like jackhammer of this background noise again.
Yeah, and I wanted to add to that because this is something that I technically know, not everyone does, which is those grounding mats that you use. Sometimes they have the blankets that you plug in and it's just grounding. That's great. If you do decide to get one of those, make sure that the ground in your outlet is actually grounded. And so the best thing is to have a professional come in, or if you know that you're actually grounded with a rod in your home.
My question would be, because again, city dwellers more of an issue with this. What do you do if you're in an apartment complex?
That's, yeah. I guess you can inquire and figure out and, get someone to come and take a look. It requires an electrician to understand these systems, right? So that's a challenge. But I guess having the interest in it, and then even going back to like when you move, looking at your home and kind of like identifying that and making sure that that's a thing.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. That was really awesome. I think everyone's more empowered now. You don't have to be afraid of EMFs. You just have to know how to mitigate them if they're a problem in your reality. So as always, like, subscribe. We'll be back with some great new content soon. Thanks for being here.